Well, hello and welcome. I guess that means it's been another 2 weeks because we are back here again with AASR Live. My name is Guy Stevens. I'm the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. Really glad you're choosing to spend some time with us this afternoon. We've got a great presentation, a great discussion that's ahead of us today. So really happy that you're taking time out of your day to come and join us. Those of you that aren't aware of who we are and what we do, as I said, my name is Guy Stevens. I'm the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. The Alliance is an organization that we began about 4 years ago. In fact, it was 4 years ago in March of 2019. Time flies quickly. We started the organization. Really, the idea behind the Alliance is that we have a mission around educating the public and connecting people together who are dedicated to changing minds, laws, policies, and practices so that we can do better for kids, for families, and for educators, so we can reduce and eliminate practices like restraint and seclusion, suspension, expulsion, and corporal punishment, and ultimately create safer environments for everyone. Any of you that have joined us before, you're probably well aware of how this is going to go today. We have a fantastic guest. Every 2 weeks when we come here to do these live events, I say, hey, I'm really excited. We've got a great guest. And I mean it. We've got great guests actually lined up, I think, almost for the entire year. We have so many great people ahead. Today, I'm really excited to have Karen Bures joining us. Karen is a special educator who is very aligned in this work about reducing and eliminating restraint and seclusion. And we're going to hear a bit about Karen's story here in a few minutes. I do want to let you know, as always, these events are being live streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. And of course, they're available after the fact. So you can go back later and watch it. You'll be able to watch a video, on those platforms. You can also listen as an audio podcast. So we put this out as an audio podcast, which is available on on Spotify, on iTunes, any of your podcast favorites that you use. So with all of that, let's go ahead and get to the really exciting part here. I want to introduce to you today our special guest, Karen. And Karen Bures is a special education teacher working with students who may display intense behaviors at times in Bend, Oregon. Karen started her career working in residential treatment care, transitioned into child welfare through the state, and then took a hiatus to be a stay-at-home parent. Once Karen's children began school, she moved into the education field. Primarily to be in the same schedule as her children. And Karen soon discovered that she was passionate about helping kids navigate the system. She began as an educational assistant in a behavior program before obtaining her own special education licensure. And Karen has continued to work to educate and coach other professionals and strategies that can really effectively prevent the need for things like restraint and seclusion during moments of escalation. So Karen's got a presentation today, and we're going to do an interview as well. So we've got a presentation and an interview, but it's going to look at the obstacles within the system and how Karen has fought for her students to make change. And I'm really excited. Karen, it is great to have you here today. I'm really excited to have you here. But first, let me just say welcome.
Thank you for having me, Guy.
Absolutely thrilled to. And you and I, of course, met. Oh gosh, it seems like it's been a while ago. It was probably year, 9 months, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a little over a year from the Facebook algorithm.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds about right. And you'd reached out. You're an educator, and I remember we had a couple of conversations, and you had been doing some really amazing work within the district you were at the time to help reduce and eliminate practices like restraint and seclusion. In talking to you, I kind of found out you were very aligned with the work that we're doing here at the Alliance, and really somebody that's out there making a positive difference. So I've had it in my head for a while that I was going to at some point get you to join us for a live event, because we have a fantastic audience here at the Alliance, and we have parents of kids that have been restrained and secluded. We have self-advocates who have themselves been restrained and secluded. We have a lot of educators, a lot of administrators, paraprofessionals, attorneys, advocates, all sorts of people. But what brings us together is this idea that we can do better. And of course, I'm a huge believer that, if we can do better, we have an obligation to do better. And I think there's a lot of opportunity. So when I met you and learned about your work, one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on here is that it's so important to me to share the story of people like yourself that are making a positive difference for the kids and the families that you're working with. and doing so, moving away from a lot of the punitive approaches that cause a lot of harm. So I'm really thrilled to have you here today, and just want to again thank you for being here. Thank you for being you and doing what you're doing. And I know we've got an exciting presentation. Before we get into all of that, because I know
That was
you're
a
going
lot
to
of pressure, Guy. I don't know.
Oh, you're gonna be fantastic. And everybody that's watching, please give Karen a very warm welcome. She told me she was a little bit nervous, and I said, "We're gonna have fun. This is nothing to be nervous about. You are here, and you're part of our community and sharing, and we're really grateful to have you here." I do want to just ask those that are watching live right now, if you're watching, and I see a number of people here already. Let us know who you are and where you're from. It's always really interesting, especially I like sharing with the guests as well, so that they know kind of where people are at, and what they're, where they're from, and what their interest might be in all of this. So tell us who you are in the chat, maybe where you're from. I always tell people we tend to have a really, believe it or not, we have a very international audience here. We have people when we do these things from the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and usually, as I say that, one of our friends from one of those places jumps on, and I'm like, "See, I told you." So at any rate, we'll wait and see if people tell us where they're from. But why don't we start out, Karen, before we get to your presentation? I think you wanted to just give us a little bit about your story and about your background. And when you're ready, you let me know, and I'll bring your deck up. And I think we had agreed today that during your presentation, I was going to stick around, and that I might ask you questions, and we might take some questions from people that are watching as well. And I will just let you know, we're getting people that are jumping in here already. Not putting added pressure on
I'm
here.
trying really hard not. I have some team members in here though, so that
Okay,
might
great.
and
Here I have a cast from Washington State. We've got from Ben, go Karen. I'm going to think that Sasha's maybe somebody that knows you.
Yeah.
We've got somebody here from Texas. Let's see, I'm a COTA working in schools near Mount Hood, Oregon. Lisa from Idaho. Somebody in early childhood in Indianapolis. Oh, we got a good crowd here today. We have somebody here from Angie from Nebraska. Let's see, Chantel. There we go. Chantel's one of our volunteers. She's also in New Brunswick, Canada. Salem, Oregon. I have a 12-year-old with autism that spent the entire year in seclusion. They're calling it a personal environment. Oh gosh, I'm sorry to hear that. We have Teresa here from an OT from South Dakota. Another occupational therapist in New Jersey. And I'll tell you this, Karen, and I don't know what your experience is. I'm a big fan of occupational therapists and social workers. They both tend to be some of the nicest professionals that I work with. And OTs have so much potential to help out, and sometimes not fully realized in the schools that they're in, from my experience. Michigan, and we've got Sunday here, who is part of a fantastic group in Michigan, who's actually working to reduce and eliminate restraint seclusion in the state of Michigan. And again, somebody else from Bend. So you've got some friends here. So you're among friends. You've got some other folks here from other places, but looks like a great group. So let me give it to you to tell us a little bit about your background, and then when you are ready for me to, I will bring up your presentation. We'll kind of go through that.
Yeah, well, so you spoke a little bit about my my experience, my background, and really my work with kids with big behavior started in residential treatment, and I was fresh out of college and really had no business working with students with big feelings, because as a 22-year-old, I had no world experience that made me the best person.
Well, and to not to reflect on you here, but one of the things that really always comes into my mind here is that we talk a lot about the brain science, about the neuroscience piece of this, and what do we know about brain development? That our brains are not fully developed until we're 25 or 30 years old,
Right.
and when we're putting expectations on people that are sometimes not much older than the students that they're working with,
Right.
by no fault of their own, it's a really tough position to be in.
Right, and I think, like, I got a lot of accolades. I was, good at it, but in reflecting back, what I was good at was controlling the environment, but from a compliance lens, versus, where I hope to have evolved from a real trauma-informed lens now. And so I was very competent at making sure the schedule was, tight, and everything was as controlled as I could possibly make it. But when students were humans and had big feelings, that I think that threatened all of our sense of we don't know how to control this situation. And the only training that we received at that time was restraint and seclusion. And so that was that was a go-to intervention. And I don't say that to, brag or like I don't feel good about that piece
Right.
of it. But it has led me to I have experience doing it. And so I really have come to a place where I can understand the level of trauma that I inflicted on other students and other kids, not intentionally by any means. I
Mhm.
thought I was doing my job. And my focus has always been the preventative sort of aspect of it. But at that time in my 20s, that was the only skill that I had when those situations and when those escalations started.
Yeah.
So
And that's such a common problem is
it's
that
hard to say it out loud, though. It's like
right, right,
looking back,
right.
it's hard to acknowledge that.
Have you looked back, and considered the trauma that it caused for you? Because, I mean, we know that, physically restraining or secluding someone, is something that can be traumatic. I mean, have you ever kind of reconciled that as well about kind of the impact that it had on you? I mean, certainly you seem, and from what I know about you, you probably felt like, well, gee, this doesn't feel right to me, but this is what I'm being told to do, which
Yeah.
happens, I think, to so many, especially young educators that go in a field that, never imagined they might be running into this. But have you ever reflected on that, kind of the trauma that it may have led to for you?
Yeah, at this point in my life I have, because in my last district, I also, participated and initiated seclusion and restraint, but I had a different feeling at on the other side of that. So, the escalation happened, um, a lot of those times I was instructed to restrain a student, and I did so, but where in my 20s I felt, not necessarily happy about it, but I still felt like I'm controlling the situation. I've
Right.
kept everybody in this room safe. That is what I'm supposed to do. My job is safety. I didn't have that feeling anymore. I started to have a lot of big feelings myself about it. Um, and it was during a year where I was actually a paraprofessional, and we had been instructed to initiate a restraint on a student who had a real soft spot for. And as we were restraining him, I looked down and he was crying, just crying, and like something significantly shifted in that moment from thinking this is an ugly part of the job, but a part of the job to I can't we I have to do something different. I have to be better
Mhm.
than this. I can't. Like he's just like a little kid that's crying, doesn't know why he's having big feelings. Looking back, it
Mhm.
wasn't I would not have said that that was a life-threatening situation,
Mhm. Mhm.
that we needed to do that in restraint. It was a large situation, but I caused trauma, and I have held on to that particular story for a very long time, and sort of made it my goal and my mission and my passion to change it, to change what I could, in my little pocket of the world, and also to advocate on a larger scale. Because I don't think that educators are maliciously restraining or
Right.
secluding.
Right.
There are probably some very abusive people in systems, so I
Right.
want to
Right. Right.
recognize that those people are there.
But likely the outliers. I mean, I don't think most people go into education
Right,
because they want to restrain and seclude kids. But when you're taught this and you believe it's the only thing you can be doing,
right.
people and I mean, not to mention there's kind of a bit of a well, I would say an issue around the fact that we're often so conditioned for compliance, that we do things that don't feel right to us because we've been conditioned to comply. We've been conditioned to say, okay, well, maybe this doesn't feel right, but this is what I'm being told to do. I'm 20 years old. I'm in my first job. Here's what I'm being told. And Sunday just brought up a point. I just want to share a comment here, because Sunday has kind of, shared something that I was thinking as well as you were saying this. Sunday said, I came through the residential system. And I just want to say that I really appreciate you were looking at your own involvement critically, but urge you to be gentle with yourself, that you were doing what you were taught. And when you knew better, you obviously started working to do better or different. I appreciate your honesty so much. And Sunday, that you put that really well. And this is something, Karen, you may have heard me say before. And I think we probably both share this. I've got this really big belief that, if we know better, we have an obligation to do better. I think about the quote from Maya Angelou, that you do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, you do better. But not only did you begin to do better, you began to take it to a higher level to encourage others to do better. So let me be quiet and just let you continue on with your story. But this is tough. And I mean, it takes a lot of courage to share what you're sharing here today. And, I know we're our own hardest critics. And, even as a parent, I look back, I think about the things that I've learned in my journey over especially the last, 4.5, 5 years. And then I look back at my early parenting and think, oh gosh, I wish I had known then what I know now.
Mhm.
I wish Mona Delahook's book, Brain Body Parenting existed when my first child was born. But again, it really is about, knowing better, doing better. And you're such a great example of that. So anyway, I'll be quiet, but I just wanted, I
No,
know Sunday's point about like having, you know, uh, grace for yourself is really important.
well, I appreciate you saying that, and Sunday, I appreciate you, saying that too. I don't think I think adults, have a really hard time admitting, that maybe that they did something wrong,
Mhm.
um, for a multitude of reasons, for their own trauma upbringing, for their own shame cycle, fear of repercussion. Like, there's a lot of complex reasoning, um, that can go into that, but I think the thing that I wanna normalize is that I am not a perfect educator. I am not a perfect human being. And I have participated in the system in a way that I do not feel pride about. And the only thing that I can do is continue to share my story and be loud when I need to be loud, and just kind of put it out there so that we can normalize growth, right?
Mhm, mhm.
But that's hard and tricky, and I'm sweating and I'm blacking out, so I don't even know what words are coming out of my mouth anymore.
You're doing a fantastic job. And I know we're going to move into your presentation here in a minute, but I think the other thing, when I first began talking to you, and heard your story about what you were doing, and how much you were trying to push change, and really kind of what you had learned, and you were actually a great example of success in reducing and eliminating restraint and seclusion where you were working at the time, and even received some recognition, for that work that you were doing. But we're in systems sometimes that are quite difficult, and I'm not going to ask you to go into any detail here, but I know from working with you that you were even putting your career in jeopardy because of how strongly you felt about the need to do better for kids. And I mean, I don't say that lightly. I mean, I really mean that, you were really putting the kids you served, above yourself. And, that's a rare thing in today's world. And I just want to recognize that, you know, um, what, again, knowing what I know, what you were doing and what you have done, to try to influence change. So,
Yeah, so I have spent a lot of time doing some trainings, and I got to be a part of this program, that sorry, I truly loved, um, and worked with some amazing educators who are also aligned with this thinking. So I certainly was not working in a vacuum. But that moment with that student happened in this program, and I as a paraprofessional, you have even less power than a teacher in a
right.
situation. And so that can also create a level of complexity about pushing back on the system. But I think I think where I landed was I need to get in there. Like I need to get my license. I need to get in there. Like I know that I can do better. And we did we did better. We did really. I'm incredibly proud of the work that we did, and I love these humans with my whole heart. And these kids are our kids. And so when I was looking at next steps or how to push the system, I thought, well, I'll prove it, right? Like I'll
Mhm.
prove it before I ask for change. Like I'll prove that it's possible because I think there's a lot of educators, there's a lot of administrators in the system in general. It's like a big barge, like it doesn't change very easily or quickly. And so all I thought is I can prove what we can do here. And we did. And I was asked to speak. Well, we were asked to speak, but I volunteered to speak to the board about it. And so I presented how we had been able to reduce our restraint and seclusion so drastically, and got a lot of positive recognition from it, a lot of positive feedback. And so I went into summer feeling pretty empowered around it. And I think that was probably about the time that I stumbled across your group on Facebook, which I always think the Facebook algorithm is a really creepy thing, but it was. I'm so glad that it happened in this situation. And so I started popping on and looking around, and like, there's a lot of people that feel this way.
Mm.
It's not just a Karen Bures. It's not just our team. Like, there's a lot of people pushing for this change. And I think that that gave me some feeling of empowerment as well. Like I'm not on my own in this. And so we came back into the next year, and I requested a formal sort of look at implementing a different crisis prevention plan.
Mhm.
So in Oregon, you have to have a crisis prevention program in place. And the one that is used here is one that has restraint attached to it. And so my initial request was, are there programs that don't have restraint attached to it? Because of everything we've just talked about,
Right,
right? Like you're
right.
training people to restrain children, and there's there's problematic training as well,
Right, right.
within that. You are preparing people with this sense of like they're going into war, and at some
Mhm,
point this terrible thing is going to happen, and they're going to have to be prepared for it in this way.
mhm, mhm.
And so you're setting up so many people to view it through that lens. And so the first thing that I thought was, well, let's change the training, let's change the lens.
Right.
And so you were really great with helping me identify some different programs. And I think at first I thought there was a window. My direct admin had a very more old school approach to all of this, and I don't think was open to that change. But I thought that there might be some other people in the situation that could sort of
Mhm.
help me push this change. And uh, it felt that way for a minute, and then I think one of the things that I ran into that a lot of educators run into is, um, if you push too hard on people with power, that can be threatening and feel threatening. And so I got a lot of negative pushback, a lot of threats to my career, and ultimately was asked to sign a piece of paper saying I would no longer talk about not restraining children.
Mm.
And that, in the same way that that moment happened with that student, like something just like
Mhm.
no, I can't. And it's a weird thing to feel like you have to walk away from the kids that you're fighting so hard for in order to protect them and to protect yourself. um but that's ultimately the decision that I came to. um when I reflect on it, I think about, when they do the airplane training and they're like, you have to put on your mask
Mhm,
first.
mhm, mhm.
That's what it felt like. It felt like I had to put on my mask to save my own career in order to
Be
continue
able to
fighting
do
for change. And
right.
but that was very difficult decision.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm a verbal processor, so anyone that's still in here watched me sort of publicly grieve that.
Mhm.
But it also, I think, lit a fire in me. Um, and so I am with a different district, and they I so far I have received a lot of support around my philosophy around this.
Mhm. Mhm.
They still implement the same training program, but I feel like it has been a safe place for me to at least advocate and talk about this and find other like-minded educators who are also. So I'm going to continue to talk about it in the hopes of finding more people that maybe are afraid to speak up or
Mhm.
aren't sure what to do instead, and the only training that they really have is restraint and seclusion,
Mhm.
and they have, there's a real narrative that it keeps everybody safe.
Right, right, right.
Mm.
Well, when we know the opposite is really true, right? We know
Yeah,
that the moment you go hands-on, you're putting everybody at risk.
yeah.
Anything you can do to prevent the need, and I think you and I have similar thoughts here, but I don't think seclusion's ever appropriate. I think restraint should be exceedingly rare and unusual. I mean, the situations where it's a life-threatening situation, perhaps, but this should not be happening, multiple times a day or multiple times a week. I mean, it should be something that's really unusual.
And I
So
think that's where the training comes in, because I think that people in those moments feel threatened,
right, right.
right? But that's really about their own dysregulation and
Yep.
their own lack of knowing what to do, and so they do feel afraid. I think that they legitimately feel that way. And if you are regulated and trained, you know that that situation was not actually a life-threatening situation.
Right, right. Well, and that's an important piece of where we need to go with training in terms of, it's been said many times before, you need a well-regulated adult to help a dysregulated child. And we need to focus on that. We need to focus on helping adults that do have fully developed prefrontal cortexes to stay regulated even when the situations are difficult. So you have put together a slide presentation
Yeah.
about what educators can do, and I'm going to bring it up on screen here, but I was really excited to have you come today and talk about this because we do have a lot of educators that are part of our community. And, as you mentioned kind of a moment ago, um, it can be scary. I mean, it can be scary because systems push back. There's retaliation that can be very real. And sometimes there's just all this uncertainty, like where do you even start? So with that, I'm going to bring your presentation up on the screen and allow you to kind of take it away. I'm going to hang out here as we agreed, and I might jump in occasionally with a question. Or if anybody watching, if you have questions, you're welcome to put those in the chat. We'll try to get to some of those as we go. Depending on how we're looking on timing, we might wait for the end for some of those. But go ahead and feel free to put things in the chat as we go. So, Karen, let me let you go ahead and take your presentation over, and I will be quiet until I'm not.
Okay.
We'll talk.
All right.
All right, thanks.
There we go. Okay. All right. So the big question is, if not restraint and seclusion, then what can we do? And so before, when I was really reflecting on how to articulate to other professionals and other educators how to explain, I'm not a trainer by any means, so this is going to be really bumpy and probably disjointed, but I'm going to do my best. Um, but I think as much as I can outline some real specific interventions, what it really comes down to is that it's you, and it's the relationship that you have with your students. And we've all seen a lot of TikToks. We all hear from educators who are overwhelmed and at capacity kind of roll their eyes at this thought, right? That it's not that simple. And for me, it really is. Um, because I don't think that kids in general, but specifically students with large behaviors, I don't think that they are rule followers, right? There's a lot of people in the world that are rule followers, but there's a lot of us that, and I say us, I'm not a rule follower, that are not. And I think that they follow people, not rules. And so really, um, you're the intervention, you're the magic, you're the connection. um, and so that is underlying everything that I'm gonna go through next. The environment, I realized I also have another friend, Annie. I don't think she's in here, but I have learned a lot from her as well. Talking about the environment and how important the environment is. I think that there is a lot of pressure for teachers to have lots of anchor charts and lots of pictures and lots of decorations and all with good intentions. But I think that we need to be a little bit more thoughtful and planful around what that environment looks like. A lot of the students that we work with have sensory needs. And so, looking around at your space, this is an area that you get to control. One of my other teammates, when I was really struggling through all of this, told me, just shut the door, Karen, and do your thing. And it's that is what I want to pay it forward to somebody else. Look around your room, make it the safe spot where you have considered all of these sensory needs, and then close the door and do your thing. So there's auditory obstacles. That's not the right word, but to keep in mind, is it too loud? Is it too quiet? Is there music? Is there a lot of in and out of the classroom that makes a lot of extra noise going around? Those are all things to consider when you're like making your schedule and looking at transitions. The lighting is obviously huge. Do you have too much clutter on the walls? My very first year as a teacher, I put up every learning objective, everything that we were learning, I put on an anchor chart on the wall on a bulletin board, and they aren't looking at those. That's an optics thing. And so I did get the opportunity to revamp our classroom, and I just took a lot of time to think about like what is necessary to put on the wall, and is it in a space and put up in a way that is accessible for any of my students versus just looks good for the admin if they come into the room. Tactile considerations of fidgets. I know specifically a lot of gen ed teachers are very nervous about fidgets, but they can be beautiful tools. They can become toys, but that's where the support and the teaching and the coaching comes in. Because I think I'm going to go back to this a lot, but one of the first years in my teaching, I worked insanely hard to get these students to transition back and forth into the hallway as quietly as I could possibly get them. And I was sitting in a grocery store one day and I was looking around at people looking at their phones, like talking to their partner or whoever they were there with. And I had this realization that I was not creating a warm, inviting environment by demanding that compliance. And so introducing all of those like fidget tools when they're waiting for something versus just hoping that they sit there and calmly and quietly wait for the 10 minutes, is really an unrealistic expectation. Chewy necklaces, space, are you too close? Are you too far away? Like all of those things you really have to take into consideration on a moment by moment basis. And then, of course, movement. Do you have a break space in your classroom? I feel like every single gen ed classroom should have a designated area that is practiced and accessible to everybody, not just the student that may struggle more than another with big behaviors, but to everybody, so that we normalize we're taking care of our feelings and this is a safe spot in order to do that. Are we building in movement into our learning? Are we taking brain breaks? Go Noodles is one of our favorite. Jack Hartman, big fan. But these are like little things that can easily be implemented into the gen ed curriculum and classroom too. I do think that our teachers are really overwhelmed right now. And so when you talk about some of these things, that feels like one thing too many. And so I want to say that I'm suggesting all of these things and can acknowledge that there are also larger systemic things that need to change.
I just want to jump in real quick and say that I love that you're talking about all of this in context of all children, of general ed, of all children, because we don't build inclusive settings if we're segregating and only building things in certain environments. And the fact is, there's a lot of kids that are in general education settings that may not even have recognized difficulties or disabilities that are going to benefit from these things. And I think that's such an important um, message, is that so many of these things are really going to benefit all. It reminds me of the quote, and I don't remember, I don't know who to credit it to, so I'll just kind of share it. But somebody had said at one point, if you design a classroom, around the needs of autistic children, all children get benefit, right?
Mhm.
And they were just kind of making the point that, the things that make something accessible to one child is making it accessible to all.
Yeah.
The whole idea of like universal design for learning, like what do we do? Anyway, I just wanted to
Yeah.
jump on that point and say I
No,
love
I
that.
think that's
I
a
love
really
you
good
talking
point.
about that setting and as well.
Well, and when we're looking at things like disrupted learning, there's a lot of pushback right now on the system, and it is valid and it is necessary. And when there is a way to support all of the students in your classroom who may not be experiencing the large behaviors that
Right.
another student, but in a way that you can build classroom culture around support of that student learning those skills versus I keep hearing a lot of like they're causing trauma to other students, and what
Yeah.
about the other students? And it's like there's a way to do both. There is a way to keep everybody safe, and there is a way to openly talk about everybody has struggles. everybody
Amen. Amen.
everybody
Amen.
has mental health,
Yeah.
everybody has big
Yeah.
feelings. Like, can we, like, everybody has that, and just because some people can mask better than
Right.
others, and can control it better than others, doesn't mean that it won't benefit somebody else to have
That's right,
those.
that's right. And of course, there's also kids who, there are kids that become overwhelmed and have big behaviors, but there are kids that become overwhelmed and shut down. There are
Right,
kids that become overwhelmed and
right,
may go into more of a freeze kind of response. And again, these things are helping because those children are often not seen or recognized
right,
for the difficulty that they're having. And again, when you create the culture around that, you're gonna benefit everybody.
right.
I love that you're talking about that. That's fantastic.
It's very weird that I can't see you.
Just a
Uh,
disembodied voice somewhere.
it's like Oz behind the curtain.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, the next one is IEP accommodations, and for everybody in the special education world, we all know what those are. But I don't think that they're always implemented with fidelity. I'm probably going to say some unpopular things in this presentation, and that is not to support my fellow not show support to my fellow educators, and not to acknowledge, like I said, some of the issues in the education system, because believe me, I also get very loud about those. But when we are looking at what supports a student needs, if all I can see is the schedule that you have printed out that the adult is following them around with, you are not providing IEP accommodations, and there's a lot of them that will help those students. And so I think I just wanted to say that out loud, that I think sometimes, because we have large caseloads, which is one of those systemic problems, um, and because we have dysregulated adults right now, we don't necessarily at all times have thoughtful planning going into place. And so you should have a real clear um, knowing of your students' needs and what accommodations have been put into place that have shown to be successful. So because I always have been in this sort of specialized environment, it has had some advantages with being able to really dig in there and figure out a plan that is help support that student. But if they transition back into an environment where all they're doing is carrying around their visual schedule all day, we're not it's all of those behaviors are going to start to show up again, right? Because they're not being appropriately supported. So I think I just wanted to say those words out loud, as unpopular as they may be, that we really need to be putting forth thoughtful planning, not
Mm,
just
mm,
reactive planning.
mm.
Um,
And execution, right? Because, one of the
right.
things that, one of the things that we see kind of on our end of things is that, and I'll share with you my opinion on this, but when I see a kid that's been restrained or secluded, what I often really see is a kid whose needs have not been appropriately met.
Mhm,
And sometimes those needs are outlined in an IEP, but they're not being followed. Other
mhm,
times they just really haven't been appropriately outlined. And I would say
mhm.
that any time that something like this were to happen, and of course I don't believe that seclusion should ever happen. I think restraint should be really very unusual. But I mean, if something like that happens, you need to figure out like what went wrong and what do we need to adjust. Because I do believe that um, with the exception of a real outlier that, for the most part, that, if you really understand a child's needs and are meeting those needs, that so many big behaviors can be avoided. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I will I'll get to that a little bit later in the
Okay.
presentation, but I do think that reflection is the key to all of it.
Mm,
Even if the escalation doesn't result in a restraint or
mm,
seclusion,
mhm,
I
mhm,
think that our team in particular did a very good job of like, that got big. What did we miss? Did we not implement
mm,
something?
mhm,
Is there, like, did we forget to implement it, or is it not outlined and it hasn't been found yet, and we need to do some creative thinking and problem solving together to figure out what support could, or what accommodation could support that student. So, yes, I absolutely agree with
mhm.
that. Yeah. Which brings me to visual supports. I am a huge proponent of visual supports. And like I said, I referred to the schedule, which, I obviously have an example of my own type of schedule that I use, but it is a working document. So it's not something that's in a bag that they're carrying around with, and then if something big happens, like, well, look at where you're at with the schedule. It's a real collaborative process. This is a real simplified version of a schedule, so we'll do a lot of looking at, where can we strategically put a built-in break in order to support the student, and that can be done collaboratively with the student or
Mm,
just with the team. Um, but I think that the schedule is and how we interact with it is also really important. We can get very focused on, um, this is what time we have to be here, and that is so we can't do some real good work because this is what it says on the schedule. So I think schedules can be kind of tricky. Um, the timer is a pretty regular thing that special education teachers use, but I have been, in multiple, general education classrooms where there is not a timer, there's a clock, but if you don't know how to read a clock, then that's not particularly helpful to you. And so part of the skill building that we do, is, it's important to know if you hate something, it is helpful to know I only have 3 minutes left of that thing that I hate. Or, I'm really looking forward to getting to my preferred play break. And that is happening in 5 minutes. And so I can use positive self talk to get there. And so I put that on the screen, just that it's something that I hope that gets used more and more and more, and in the gen ed setting. And that is a really easy thing that helps it's one of those things that helps all students, right? So it's not just for Johnny that he needs a timer, like all students benefit from having a visual sort of um, support there. And then all of my students have these break cards. So we make these break cards. I am not responsible for the design. I have I was very, very lucky to work with an incredible group of skilled people, and I think we all brought different things to the table. And so, Liv and Brendel on our team, where I'm trying to shout out all of them too, I love them. were largely responsible for making our visuals, and this is our break card. When we use this a lot in practicing before we have moments of escalation, so that we are normalizing checking in with ourselves and determining what we might need in a moment. And that is a really difficult skill. It's difficult for adults. It's difficult, right? So I know it's a big skill that we're working on here. um but sometimes in those moments, when our lid is flipped, we are not hearing words anymore. And so providing the tools that the student has identified as, this is a tool that helps me, having a visual in that moment, I have found to be a really effective way of de-escalating that situation. I can't see you, so I don't know. I thought you were going to say something.
Well, yeah, I will say something real quick while you're transitioning, and that was just, I love again the emphasis you're making on about, doing things for all children, and one of the things that went through my mind is just how when we normalize these things, we destigmatize them as well. It's not
Yes.
just that Johnny needs this special thing;
Yes.
it's that all kids can benefit from this, and that is so important. So that you were reading my thought, even though you didn't see my face of what I was thinking. So I'll let you keep going.
Okay. And then the next one that I have is embedded routines and scripts. So these are some of the scripts that I use and our team use. And I won't necessarily go into each of them. If anybody has a specific question around it, I can answer it. But what I would say is that this is also something that is underutilized. There's a lot of people who might do like one lesson on what this means and then never speak about it again. And that's not how most people learn. And so having those routines and those prompts and those sayings that they hear over and over and over again really help them internalize that. And I think people do not put the level of focus that they could on the scripts and the routine. And if we were all speaking the same language, right? Like if I'm using words like, was that an expected or unexpected way to tell me that you were angry? And then Johnny goes to his gen ed classroom and his teacher is like, was that an expected or unexpected way to tell me that you were angry? Then we start to see that cross-setting application versus just, in their little program, they've learned all these great skills. And then we're sort of throwing them into the deep end of the pool where nobody is using that terminology or those scripts or language. And they can get forgotten. And so that is a thing that would also, like, it's so easy to do. It's so easy, and it feels silly sometimes. Like I'll be at home and I'll say things like, that filled my bucket, and my teenager will kind of roll his eyes at me. But it is incredibly effective to have all of the people in your life using these terms that you understand. And so and that goes, the same thing goes for the routine, right? Like I think general education teachers do an excellent job the first week or two of school of practicing those routines. And then generally, like after a break, they'll practice the routines. But imagine if you make that prompt every single time, if you make the transition prompt before the transition, how many students, like I said, may be masking and can follow it, where Johnny might be like, I don't know what's happening. He looks like the only one that needs that support, but it would help so many students and Johnny before Johnny gets some really, I don't know why I chose the name Johnny. I don't know anyone named Johnny. Before that escalation happens. These are really, really simple things to place in. But I think maybe sometimes they're like so simple that it gets overlooked as like not an effective intervention when it's incredibly effective.
Karen, in a previous life, I did a lot of work around digital media, web, all of these things. And of course, we talked a lot about accessibility. And people often think about accessibility as making things accessible to people with disabilities, but they often think in a very linear way. They often think it's, it's the curb cut that makes a wheelchair have access. What people often don't realize is that accessibility is really more than that. It's really about making things available to more people in more situations. And so much of this is about accessibility, right? It's about,
Mhm.
and sometimes we don't even realize the unintended positive consequence
Mhm.
of making something more accessible, because we don't recognize that it's the person we don't know that really benefits and
Right.
needs that. And that's what's really beautiful about what you're talking about, is that, this is really about making things more accessible to all students, and really even doing a better job supporting kids that we might not even know need some of these additional supports. So anyway, I figured I would just chime in with that, and just
Right,
kind
well,
of
and
floated my mind.
if we're talking about inclusion, right?
Right. Yep.
Inclusion is not Johnny's in the classroom,
Right.
but he has his own individual little plan that somebody is talking to him about one-on-one in the corner. That's not inclusion,
Right.
right? Like, inclusion is really, like, embedding all of this
Yep.
into your whole entire system,
Yep.
knowing that Johnny needs it at a higher level maybe, but that he's not pointed out for that need. He's not alienated for that need.
Yep.
He's,
Yep.
you know,
Agreed. Yeah. Great points. You're generating some ideas that are popping through my head right now. So I have more exciting things to propose to you later.
I don't know what that means, but okay. All right. And then specially design instruction is basically what I've been talking about this whole time, right? I think that in our world, people spend a lot of time focused on how to get these kids to access their education. And that is extremely important. But we can't access our education if we are not regulated, and if we do not feel safe, and we do not feel valued, and all of the things that we as adults feel, right? Like, I ultimately had to leave my dream job because I didn't feel valued or safe. So if you can apply that to children, like, they feel all of those same things. And so when we're looking at specially designed instruction, we're looking at real, targeted and purposeful and meaningful instruction around some of these soft skills, not just how are we teaching math, but how are we teaching how to share, how are we teaching all of those how are we teaching how to take accountability, which is not the same thing as, like, you have to grovel and apologize or whatnot, but how do we reflect on our part in a situation? How do we go to recess? Like, I think there's a lot of adults that just think recess is like the best time on earth. It's Disneyland we're sending them out to.
Mm.
And it is a cutthroat environment that, if you don't have some support and you haven't taught some of these real life skills on that playground, you're also setting kids up, for those moments that they are not prepared to know how to handle. And so I think that when we're looking at SDI, we also need to apply that to some of these, like, soft, social emotional skills, not just, our academics. And so, I have a couple examples. Boom Card, it's called Boom Learning, and it is just a platform, and it's a little bit like TPT, but in the virtual world. And so this is my store, and I'm not promoting my store, but I do want to just point. I wanted to use it as an example of some things that fall into the SDI category, that I think get overlooked a lot. So when we're talking about, how to handle making a mistake, that's not something that you might feel like needs, consistent lessons around, but it is. It is for a lot of kids, not just Johnny. And so, really making sure that we are implementing specially designed instruction, not just for academics, but also for the behavioral, social emotional learning support. So those are just some examples.
I know you said you weren't promoting your store, but you've got this, and somebody's going to think, "Hey, is there a link to this?" Do you have?
Yeah, and I will send the link, but
Okay, if you can just when we get wrapped up, if you can send it, and
yeah,
we'll share it.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
struggled with like putting my link on there on the thing, and then I thought, no, like my point is really just to point out
Sure, sure, sure.
all of
But I'm
these.
sure that there's probably somebody watching like, "Oh, I'd like to learn more about this." So, always
Yeah,
good to
awesome.
make that
I can totally
available.
do that.
Yep.
This is one of those examples of SDI. I call it there. I've coined it something new, but our team has always there's a lot of focus on what happens after some big feelings, and that can range from like I just had some big feelings and threw a thing and took a break, or it could be a big escalation. But the after part of that is extremely important, and I think that when I reference just like the need to stay on schedule and the need to keep going, this is one of the SDI moments that really gets overlooked, in helping them learn some problem solving skills, right? So we use collaborative problem solving. So what got hard, and then dosing of how we can start to practice how to solve our problems, um, cleaning up any mess that we make. I know that everyone has seen the photos of the torn apart classroom, which I have some big feelings about anybody posting anything like that. But we've all seen it. And then my thought is always like, did you take that moment to help repair? It's not about cleaning up the mess because you're in trouble and there's a punishment, but it's sort of a natural consequence, right? Of we made a mess and we need to clean it up, and I'm going to help you, and I'm going to be right here, and it's safe to do that. But that's a life skill for us to learn. Um, I use buckets a lot. I don't I shy away from I have used apologies and done a lot of lessons around apologies, but it can it can easily be misused, as some sort of like you will have to go apologize for this thing that you did. And so I've shied away from that language and more into, our feelings are always valid, right? It is okay that you got really, really angry. But we may have dipped some buckets, which is a metaphor for our hearts, right? We're all interconnected. So how we relate and respond to each other is all connected. And so how can we make the situation feel a little bit better? How can we fill up everybody's bucket, right? What's our plan for the next time this happens, because it's probably going to happen again. There's going to be unexpected moments that happen, and your teacher's going to make a mistake or you're going to make a mistake, and how are we going to try and plan for that for the next time? And then, do we need to practice? I'm a big proponent of practicing when we're regulated. And so, do we need to practice that plan so that we have a little bit of muscle memory that starts? And that is not an immediate change. Like, you are not going to practice what to do the next time, and then the next time everything's just gonna, be perfect. It's small steps, but the practice is really important. And then, do we need to make anything up, or is that not necessary and we can drop it for today? Or was it an escape around math, and maybe we need to do some lower demand math, but we need to um, rewrite that escape plan for them. So I think this is a really big one, and extremely effective in change, and something that not a lot of people do because
Hey,
of the schedule.
hey, Karen, I've got to ask you a question. So,
Yeah.
the fill any buckets.
Yeah.
Is that in any way related to or based on the book? How do you
Yes.
fill a bucket a day?
Yes.
So I have to tell you that was a book that we had when my kids were young, and I remember reading them so many times. So when you start talking about buckets, like it came back in my head, and I just went out and Googled it on Amazon, and I remember that book. And I haven't read it in probably gosh, 10, however many years. But yeah, no, that's great.
Well,
Maybe
and
third one.
it's my favorite when we talk about, like,
Yeah,
classroom management,
yeah,
I think a lot of times those can be really negative,
right.
and a lot of, "I'll move your clip if you do
Yep,
this," or
yep,
"I'll
yeah. I'll
do this."
publicly shame you, right?
And yeah, and so if you use buckets, right, it gives you an opportunity to point out, acknowledge, and celebrate every single kind moment that's happened, like every
Mhm.
single positive thing. And it doesn't matter if you feel like that's just a given that somebody should do that, right?
Right.
We acknowledge all of the things, and we actually like put a little like physical heart into their
Mm.
bucket so they can sort of see
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah.
So it's my
Yeah, well,
it's
that book has a very fond memory for me, so
yeah, I
I haven't
really
looked at it in
love
years, but I'll have
it.
to go back and read it. I do have one question here that just
Yeah.
popped up that's very relevant to what you're talking about now, so I'm gonna bring it up. Veronica says, "How long after calm down should the repair routine be practiced?"
There's not a specific answer for that. Sometimes you can run out of time in a day, right? And then we're just going to start the next day. But we're going to start with the repair routine the next day. So it's okay that we didn't get to it in the heat of the moment. But we're going to circle back to it because that's how important this piece is.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, and so it kind of depends on where they're at, right?
mhm,
Like
mhm.
usually it's if you have gotten full regulation, you can usually do it
Right,
immediately
right.
following that regulation, but you do have to make sure that you're in full regulation because if they start to escalate, then you know that they weren't quite ready for that step.
Yeah, I was thinking that, and I think that's really the answer, right? Is that, you can't get to repair until you've reached regulation.
Right.
And, I mean, and it's all about getting to the cortex, right? The thinking part of our brain, which you kind of used the analogy earlier about flipping our lids. And, when we become dysregulated, we flip our lid, our prefrontal cortex, that thinking decision part making part of our brain is offline. So when kids are dysregulated, they're not really at a point where they're ready to do
Right.
something like repair. So that's great. I
Right.
I do wanna just bring up one other, comment here, and this is just a comment, but just so that you know that, when I said we have friends from New Zealand that jump on, one of our friends from New Zealand is on, and we got a greetings from the future because they are a day ahead of us. It is
Oh,
Friday
that's
morning in New
weird.
Zealand, and this is from a good friend and ally, Linda, who, is amazing and has done some amazing work in New Zealand. But Linda says that I look forward to watching the recording of this presentation later today. So truly know that we've got Canada, New Zealand, maybe some other countries on here as well.
That's
But let me
cool.
let me let you continue
It's
on.
frightening. I don't know. Oh, sorry, my little thing is very sensitive. Okay, when we're looking at escalations, this is a big one. Staff switching, right? So this when I was thinking about like preventative and proactive, there are a lot of moments along the way that you have an opportunity to switch out of that situation. You might not be the person that is like you are no longer effective, whether that student is sort of targeted on you as the problem, whether you are in fact the problem, meaning intentionally or non-intentionally, right? You might be the problem. Um, Switching out with a preferred staff, there's a real I think this is a real hard part for educators because they get very their ego gets involved, and that's going to be an unpopular thing that I'm saying out loud, and so I'm very sorry if that made anybody uncomfortable, but your ego can get involved, and it happens to the best of us, and we want to make sure that we follow through. We are the person that set the expectation, and then this big thing happened, and so we need to see it through. And no, we don't. Like no, we don't. And this is probably the biggest area of growth for myself, because I was somebody that said things like that. I felt very much like, nope, they're just trying to get away from me, and it is not a me problem. So I'm going to see this through. And it has taken a lot of reflection and a lot of trust in the people around you that maybe I am the problem. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I did forget a prompt, or maybe I was harsher than I meant to sound, or maybe I am grumpy and tired and a little bit more reactive because I'm also a human being. It's not about perfection, but it is about acknowledging your own imperfections. and getting someone in who can help. And if our goal is aligned with wanting to help and support the student in re-regulating, then it doesn't matter if you're the person that does it or if they have another safe person that does it, right? And we all connect in different ways. So I love all of my students, and there are some of them that think I am the best thing ever to have walked the earth. And then there are students that think Liv is the best person and the best human, and Emmy is the best person, and Lucy. It doesn't have to be you at all times. If you have a shared goal of regulation, then it doesn't matter if I do it a little bit differently than Emmy does it, as we're going in the same direction and we have the same goal. But that takes a lot of work on setting your ego aside. And I hear a lot of people say things like, well, it's not about me, but, and like, it's really hard. Because we do take it personally, because we do care about these kids and we do
Yeah,
care about their work.
we're all human, and
Right.
it's
And our
easy to do,
feelings can
right?
get hurt,
Yep,
right?
yep,
Like, I think that I'm helping you and you're asking for someone else,
right.
and that hurts my feelings. But it's my job to acknowledge my feelings are hurt because I wanted to be the person to help you because I love you, and I'm not what you need right now. You need somebody else. So I'm
Mhm.
going to get who you need in
Yep.
order to help you, because if that's really my goal, then it doesn't matter if it's me. And that is a universal thing that I've gotten really loud about. I've gotten a lot of pushback. It's very difficult for adults, I think, to wrap their minds around that concept. But
Mhm.
um
Yep, you're right. I mean, I can't tell you, Karen, how many times we've seen kids that were being restrained, secluded, that were having a lot of difficulty in a given classroom, that moved to a different setting, and the biggest difference was the adults.
yeah,
Yet the child suddenly miraculously is
right,
doing so much better, and it's about safety, right?
right,
If a kid doesn't feel safe, if a and it comes down to the safety of the educator as well. I'm not at all suggesting that that's critical. I mean, if a teacher
right,
doesn't feel safe, they can't teach. If a kid doesn't feel
right,
safe, they can't learn. But sometimes it is that, and you hate to feel that way, but I mean, and let's face it, we don't all get along with all people.
right,
Um,
right,
and by no fault of our own. I mean, it may
right,
be. I mean, you may remind a child of someone that traumatized them.
right,
That's not something you've done, but
right,
it takes a lot. And you talked about it being uncomfortable, and I think back to an event that I was at, and somebody kind of brought up something about are you uncomfortable or unsafe? Nobody
right,
should feel unsafe in these discussions, but you might feel uncomfortable. But
right,
that uncomfortable space is where we learn, and it's where we grow, and it's really critical.
right. Absolutely.
Yep. So I do want to make you aware of the time. We're because I made you promise that we wouldn't go long, but we're kind of headed in that direction. But to
I
me,
got
that's a
a
good thing,
little chatty,
because
and
that
that's what I'm
shows
happy
that
for.
shows that you're having fun, like I told you you would. I told you this would be fun. So I don't want to rush you. I want you to get through your material, but I would like to allow a little bit of time for questions.
Yeah, I'll go
Um,
through the next ones pretty quick.
okay, sounds good.
There's only a couple more. Reflection, which we've obviously talked a lot about, but it's just a really important piece, and so I wanted to make sure. I wasn't sure. I'm not a public speaker by any means, so I wasn't sure if I was going to forget to say some really important things, and so I was trying to make a visual for myself.
Well,
So
just
I
to put a
did.
note on it, I've got plans for you about public speaking. So
Oh God, no. Oh. But the reflection piece, right? Like, did I make a mistake? Have we missed something? What did we miss? Where can we be flexible? And that is not me being a horrible human. That is me learning and growing and getting, and I hope that I continue to get better. Like, I hope 5 years from now I look back and think, why did I do that? Like, why did I think that that was the best way to do that? Um, I think is a real important part of individual growth. And so I just think that we should talk about it. We should say all of the hard things out loud, and we should acknowledge when we've made a mistake, and we should just say all the things out loud so we can just continue to grow together, for the sake of kids. That's all.
absolutely.
I don't know
And
if that sounded cheesy. I was trying to.
no, not at all. I think it's important. A critical part of this process is reflecting, kind of self-reflection, but as well reflection on the system. Like,
Yeah.
where's the system not working, and what can we do about it? And it's really critical. If you don't,
Well,
I look at these things as being iterative, right? I mean, it's about learning, it's about doing better, and you've got to take that time for reflection.
well, and I think in these large systems, right, in the education system, in the health system, in the police system, there is a sense of like, don't say the negative thing, right? Like if you are a loyal member, you will not critique it. And I think it's the opposite. I think if you care about something enough, you have to critique it. You have to constantly be questioning and learning and growing. Otherwise, maybe you don't care enough.
Mm, mhm,
So
mhm.
me pushing back on something is not indicative of I don't care or I'm disloyal. It's actually the opposite. Like I care very much and I love so much about it and it can be better.
Mhm, mhm. So I need to figure out how to get you a disruptor shirt. One of the conferences that I attended last, I guess it was his last summer, was the Trauma Informed Educators Network Conference, and Matthew Portell, who runs that group, has long talked about kind of the need for disruptors and people being disruptors. And I don't have one on now, but I have a couple of them that are unapologetic disruptors. We need people to disrupt the systems, and that's what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that I'm unapologetic. I also have my own stuff, so there's a lot of weird guilt and shame that comes with that. I'm
But you
working
shouldn't
on
be sorry
stepping
about disrupting. I mean, I know that you make a lot of effort to be mindful of where people are, and I think that's important. I think it's important to I mean, we're not here to judge people, but we're here to say, hey, in your case, like, you learned to do better, you did better, how can we help other people get there? And I don't think you should be apologetic about trying to help people move in the right direction, I guess is what I would say.
well, thank you. I also don't know how to accept compliments, so I'm gonna make this as awkward as possible. And then I think it's the final slide. Yeah, the final one is just about data and the importance of data and collecting it, um, so that you can think about what needs to change and then put that into action. I think like I said, when I was looking to push back on my own little system, my first thought was I have to see if it can work. I have to see if I can do it. I have to see if it's possible. And you can only do that by collecting the data and then looking back on it and like, yeah, it's possible. And so now we have to start having some conversations. So I think in our program, like we start data collection from day one. And I think it's incredibly important. I think it's important to look at, um, there's a lot of good. I'm going to try to say this not terribly, but I think there's a lot of good intention around providing equity in these systems. But if we're talking about equity and then you're looking at the data and you can see that restraint and seclusion disproportionately affect students of color and students with disability, are you implementing equitable
Mm,
uh,
mhm, mhm,
programming, right?
mhm, mhm,
So, I just wanted to throw that, like, take the data, look at it, analyze it, make the changes that you need to.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
And that is the end of the presentation.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take your screen off here, and
Okay.
you can actually shut your presentation down, but
Okay.
don't shut your browser down, and
Oh.
go back to the tab where we were, and you'll be able to see me again, and I'm still here, and I
Oh,
haven't left
yeah,
you.
there we go.
There you go. Do you have a couple minutes for a few
I
questions?
do.
Okay, so I wanna just encourage people that are watching now, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and we'll address a few questions here. I know we're going a little bit long, but, as long as you don't mind going a few more minutes, we'll go a
No.
couple more minutes. I just wanna start off, and I know you said, you might not take compliments well, but, I'm gonna give you one anyway. Karen, you're an amazing human,
Oh,
and I really appreciate, what you're doing and the work that you're, doing to really, I think, make a difference for all kids. And I want to do anything I can to collaborate with you and take what you've learned to others and make a difference. There's a lot of need out there, and we need more people like you. And so I'm not gonna, I won't make you respond to
I'm
that, but
like,
just know you're an amazing human doing great with stuff.
thank
So
you.
let me
Same,
get to a
ditto.
couple of questions that have popped up already. Um, so one of the questions that came was, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get that one. I got the wrong star here. Let me see if I can find it again. Oh, here it is. So there was a question about CPS, and I don't know if you have experience using CPS with non-speaking kids that might be explosive. We're actually, and I put it in the chat, we're actually doing a event. I think it's in, let's see, when is that? Oh, it's not till August, so it's a little bit forward. But two amazing folks that I know that are OTs, speech language pathologists, are doing a session actually on reducing seclusion and restraint in autistic students using CPS in non-speaking children. So we actually have a program coming up on that. But do you have any experience using CPS with non-speaking kids?
I don't have a lot of experience with nonverbal children. Um, and I'm not a CPS like trainer or expert
Okay,
by
gotcha,
any means, but
gotcha.
what I would say is that we do a lot of we have lower verbal students that we will do visual or
Hmm, hmm,
yeah, like visual communication. And so I think it depends if it's a um
hmm, hmm.
processing obstacle or a verbal
Hmm.
communication obstacle. Obviously, if they can't process the question that I'm asking, me giving a thumbs up or thumbs down doesn't help
Right,
in any
right,
way.
right. Well, I know that Lives in the Balance has what they call the five finger method, which is kind of a way of you know, for a non-speaking child that might be able to communicate, you know, what they're feeling. And in fact, I think Lives in the Balance put something on their Facebook page just yesterday because I think I saw it recently. But Marion, I also encourage you to reach out to Lives in the Balance, and they've got an amazing staff that can help you with that. But you know, I know it's not for several months now, and that's not going to be helpful to you, but we do have that up on the agenda in terms of talking about that, and I'm really excited about that presentation. Another question here, also from Marion, was how can we help teachers understand this? And I don't know exactly where that question came, but I'm going to just take it in the bigger context. So, you know, how can others? So, you know, you're on your own mission of sharing this information, but somebody that's listened to your presentation and agrees with the things that you're saying, what is your recommendation for how to share that with other educators?
I don't know if I have a good answer to that.
Mm.
That is a that it's a tricky situation. Um, if you know collaborative problem solving, I would first encourage you to learn that method because I think you can use that with adults as well. So with other professionals,
Hmm.
um, I think people in general need and want to feel validated. And so I think listening to the concerns of the teacher and validating that that's a real experience that they're having. It's like it's the same as work with kids, right? Like if you can create a safe space to have open dialogue,
Hmm.
then you've created a window that maybe you can give some helpful information versus going and telling someone, "This is what you need to do."
Right,
You
right, right. Yeah,
know?
one of the things that I've done in the past and recommended for others is that if you find something that works for you, and you know, I'm a advocate for things like collaborative problem solve, collaborative proactive solutions, Monadella Hook's work and beyond behaviors. Share a book, you know, share a book with a teacher or a team
Yeah.
and say, hey, you know, this is something that's worked really well, and I don't know if you've seen this before, but it might be helpful. You know, and of course, some people are more receptive than others, but if you can form a good relationship, and relational safety is important everywhere, right?
Mhm.
So where we can avoid having something a bit adversarial, if we can share with them something that we found, or you know, one of the other things I'd recommend, Marianne, is share this presentation, right? Share this with, you know, that's always our goal here. Our goal is if you're watching, if you think this would be useful to another parent or another educator, share this, you know, share it with them and let them kind of see. Uh,
I see Chantel, I'm sorry if I said your
mhm.
name that Russ Green stressed the importance of the AAC device. I don't know why I didn't think about that.
Absolutely.
That's a
Absolutely.
great idea.
Yeah,
Totally.
and in fact, you know, we're huge believers in really kind of the need for providing communication, and oftentimes there are things that happen in school systems where kids aren't encouraged to explore alternative augmented communication modalities, but it can make such a big difference. We actually interviewed last time Jordan Zimmerman, who the film This Is Not About Me kind of chronicled her experience in education as a non-speaking autistic. And, basically, Jordan was in high school, had a lot of behaviors. She was restrained and secluded, had a lot of behaviors through elementary school, middle school, was being tasked things that were well below her mental ability, well into high school, had low expectations, eventually had AAC an AAC device introduced, and it opened this whole world of possibility in communications. And Jordan went on to college, got a undergrad degree, got a master's degree in education, I believe, has done some really amazing work. But sometimes we see systems that are dissuading people away from AAC, when communication is a need, it's a right, and we've got to work towards that, certainly, to support people. Chantel had also just mentioned here, and I just want to share with you, thank you for being brave enough to share your story so honestly, and to show others that they can do better. And I absolutely, agree with that as well. So with all that, we've been sharing some of the links here, and I know people had asked about your slide deck as well, and we've told them to reach out to us, and we can provide that as long as you're okay with us doing that. Great. So at this point, we've gone a little bit over, and which I don't mind, but I also know that you actually have an IEP meeting coming up, so you've got more work to do. But again, I want to thank you tremendously for, one, how do you thank somebody for being who they are? But thank you for being who you are. Thank you for what you've been doing. I know you're making a difference for kids and families, and you're going to be somebody special in a lot of kids' stories about, and a lot of these kids could have ended up with very different outcomes. So the things that you're doing, the journey that you've been on is really making a difference. And I want to thank you for sharing it with our audience here today. And just thank you for all that you're doing to bring about positive change.
Can I give one last shout out to my team?
You can give a shout out to whoever. You can give a shout out to friends, families, whoever you would like.
They are Liv, Emmy, Brett, Brindle, Zach, Alex, all of you. I love you. Liv.
All right.
Did I say Liv? Thanks for standing by me.
That's fantastic. And now that you've named them, I know who they are, and I might be searching them down too, because we need more stories like this. We need to share, what people are doing and the success that they're having. It's so important. So again, I just want to thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for sharing your story. And again, I've got more ideas for more things we can do. You have any other final words you want to share with us before we
No.
All right. This wasn't so bad, was it?
I'm also really bad at saying goodbye, so I'm going to make this awkward too right now.
Don't worry about it. Well, tell you what, I'm going to ask you to stick around. We're going to say goodbye to our audience here, but you can stick around for a second so we can drag out the other goodbye.
Okay.
But thank you, Karen, again, and everybody that joined us. We'll be here again in 2 weeks for another program, and we look forward to seeing you then. And thank you for spending some time with us today. And with that, I'm going to wrap this up, and I'll see you on the other side of this, Karen.